The bridge of the Krellian dreadnought hummed with the low thrum of engines, a sound Admiral Xer'Thal had long grown accustomed to, like the steady pulse of his own armored hearts. He stood at the command dais, multifaceted eyes scanning the holographic display that sprawled before him, a web of stars and trajectories marking the human colony world of Epsilon Verge. The humans were primitives, their ships little more than tin cans propelled by chemical fury, yet they clung to this rock with a tenacity that bordered on the absurd. Xer'Thal's mandibles clicked in amusement as he replayed the intercepted transmission. "Admiral, their fleet is scattering like insects," reported Captain Lyervek from her station, her voice a precise chirp through the comms. Lyervek was cautious by nature, her exoskeletal plates etched with the subtle scars of past skirmishes, always double-checking sensor sweeps before committing to a vector. Xer'Thal waved a claw dismissively. "Insects indeed. Watch how they flit about, firing blindly. No cohesion, no strategy. It's as if they believe chaos is a weapon." He leaned closer to the hollow where red icons, human vessels, darted erratically around the debris field of their own destroyed outpost. The Krellian Armada, a formation of sleek, obsidian-hulled behemoths, encircled them like a noose. His plan was elegant. Isolate the clusters, pick them off with precision plasma lances. Humans lacked the neural links that bound Krellian crews in perfect sync. They relied on vocal chatter, delays that could spell doom. A junior officer, Ensign Thalcor, hesitated at his console. Young with unscarred chitin still gleaming, he was brave but untested, his claws twitching as he monitored the human signals. "Admiral, their transmissions are increasing. Frantic but patterned. Should we adjust for patterns in panic?" Xer'Thal interrupted, his voice booming through the bridge vents. Laughter rippled from the crew, a chorus of chitinous scrapes. "No, Ensign. This is the mark of desperation. They mock our superiority with their flailing." He straightened, signaling the fleet. "Advance Phalanx 1. Encircle and compress." As the dreadnought surged forward, the viewport filled with the cold void, punctuated by the fiery blooms of human engines straining against the inevitable. Xer'Thal felt the thrill of command, the certainty of victory. These soft-skinned mammals had no concept of adaptation. Not like the Krell who had evolved through eons of stellar wars, their forms hardened against the cosmos. The humans would break, scatter, and die. But in the flickering hollow, one human ship, a battered frigate named the Reliant, didn't flee. It veered sharply toward the debris field, its silhouette swallowed by tumbling wreckage. Xer'Thal's mandibles parted in a sneer. "Foolish. Let them hide in their junk. Phalanx 2, prepare boarding pods. We'll claim the colony intact." Lyervek's sensors pinged a warning. "Admiral, energy spikes from the field. Not human weapons, something's powering up." Xer'Thal dismissed it with a flick of his tail. "Salvage drones likely. Ignore." Yet as the fleet closed in, a shadow detached from the debris. Not a ship but a makeshift construct, hull plates welded from colony scrap, thrusters jury-rigged from mining rigs. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't planned. But it moved with purpose straight at the dreadnought's flank. On the Reliant's cramped bridge, Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests, her knuckles white against the worn leather. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her voice stayed steady over the intercom. "All hands, this is it. Riggs, get that decoy drone firing. Make it look like we're still in the field. Doc, patch through to the away team on the surface. They need to know we're buying time." Lieutenant Marcus Riggs, the ship's wiry engineer with a perpetual grease smear on his cheek, nodded from his jury-rigged console, fingers flying over exposed wiring. He was the witty one, always cracking jokes to cut the tension, but now his grin was tight. "Aye, Cap drones belching plasma like a drunk at last call. If the bugs bite, we'll make 'em choke on it." Dr. Lena Torres, the cautious medic turned reluctant tactician, monitored vitals from her medbay station. Her hands trembled slightly as she relayed cords to the ground team. 50 colonists hunkered in underground bunkers, their lives hanging on this gamble. Surface team reports seismic activity worsening. The quakes from our orbital strike are cracking the mantle. If we don't evac soon, Elena cut her off gently, we will trust the plan, or what's left of it. The original strategy had been a textbook blockade run. Slip past the Krellian picket, extract the civvies, jump to hyperspace. But the Admiral's fleet had anticipated it, shredding half their escorts in the opening salvo. Now with the Reliance engines coughing on fumes and shields at 20%, adaptation was survival. The makeshift ramship erupted from the debris, its crude prow slamming into a Krellian corvette. Alarms wailed across Xer'Thal's bridge as the impact registered. A glancing blow, but enough to rupture the corvette's hull, venting atmosphere in a silent scream. What sorcery is this? Xer'Thal snarled, his composure cracking for the first time. Lyervek's eyes widened. It's human scrap. Repurposed. They've turned our debris against us. Ensign Thalcor's claws scraped the console. Admiral, the Reliant is breaking cover. Heading for the Lieutenant. Reyes gripped the console as the bridge shuddered again, the hull groaning under another barrage from the Xerian dreadnought. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting Elena Voss's face in harsh relief. She stood at the center, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the tactical display where the alien ship's icon loomed like a predator closing in. Shields at 40%, Reyes reported, his voice tight. They're cycling their plasma lances. Next hit might punch through. Elena nodded once, sharp and controlled. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. Don't let them bracket us. Her mind raced through the options, the UNSC Vanguard's engines straining against the void. The Xerians had caught them off guard in this nebula fringe, their fleet scattering like chaff. Admiral Xer'Thal's transmission still echoed in her ears. Mocking, superior, dismissing human cobbled-together relics as unworthy prey. Tom Hale, her chief engineer, patched in from below decks, his face grimy on the split screen. Captain, we've got microfractures in the forward array. I can reroute power, but it'll take 10 minutes to stabilize. If they hit us again, they won't, Elena cut in, though doubt flickered in her gut. Tom's caution was her anchor, always calculating the odds while she pushed the envelope. Buy me 5. Reyes, signal the away team on the derelict. Status. The nebulous tendrils swirled outside the viewport, purple gases lit by distant stars, hiding the twisted hulk of the old colony ship they'd been salvaging. Private Lena Korsakov's voice crackled through. Boarding complete, ma'am. Core's intact, but the graph plates are fried. We're rigging charges to blow the drive if they board. Good. Hold position. Elena's fingers drummed once against her thigh. The derelict was their gambit. A forgotten human relic packed with volatile fusion cells. They could lure the Xerians in. The ship lurched as a proximity alert screamed. Xer'Thal's vessel had closed the gap, its sleek form cutting through the gas like a knife. A new transmission opened, the Admiral's scaled face filling the screen, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with amusement. Primitive vessel, your maneuvers amuse me. Surrender, and I may grant your crew the mercy of dissection rather than obliteration. Elena's jaw set. It wasn't her weapon here, but grit was. Admiral, your ship's pretty, but beauty doesn't win wars. We're just getting started. He laughed, a guttural rumble. Adaptation? You mammals scurry and improvise, but against Xerian precision? Futile. The channel cut and lances fired anew. Impact in 3. Reyes yelled. Tom now. Elena barked. From engineering, a hum built, power surging unevenly through the ship. The Vanguard twisted, barely dodging the volley, but a glancing blow rocked them. Sparks flew from a panel and Reyes slumped, clutching his arm. Elena dropped to his side, sealing the wound with a quick med patch. Stay with me, Reyes. We've got this. As the painkillers kicked in, he managed a grin. Aye, Captain. Just don't let the squid face win. The derelict's signal pulsed on the display. Korsakov's team in place. Elena straightened, plotting the next move. The nebula's interference would mask their feint, but one wrong turn and the Vanguard would be scrap. Xer'Thal thought them predictable. Time to show him the edge of human desperation. Captain Elena Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Vanguard's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge was a cocoon of controlled chaos, consoles flickering with tactical overlays, officers murmuring updates in clipped tones. She glanced at her XO, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, whose fingers danced across his panel, pulling up sensor data on the incoming Krellian fleet. They're holding formation, Captain, Hale said, his voice steady but edged with the caution that defined him. Xer'Thal's flagship is at the center, broadcasting that same taunt on open channels. Wants us to hear it. Elena nodded, her jaw tight. The Admiral's words from hours ago still echoed in her mind. Asterisk primitives with your crude vessels, you charge like beasts into the void. Adaptation? You mean desperation. Asterisk she'd ignored it then, focusing on the real threat, the Krellian armada closing in, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight into blinding shards. But now with the debris field from their skirmish littering the approach vector, doubt crept in like hull breaches. Options? She asked, turning to Ensign Kira Novak, the wiry engineer whose wit often cut through tension like a plasma torch. Novak leaned back, her eyes narrowing at the holographic display. The field's our best bet. Krellian sensors hate the interference. Too much metallic scrap playing havoc with their phase arrays. We weave through, they hesitate. But if we miscalculate... We don't, Elara cut in, her bravery a quiet fire that steadied the crew. She traced a finger along the projected path, a serpentine route through the twisting remnants of a long-forgotten battle. Hale plotted. Novak reinforced the inertial dampeners. We're not charging, we're dancing. The ship lurched as they accelerated, the Vanguard's thrusters firing in precise bursts. Outside, the debris loomed, a graveyard of shattered hulks, tumbling in lazy orbits. Elara felt the pull, the G-forces pressing her into the seat despite the dampeners. A chunk of wreckage, the size of a shuttle, spun into view, its jagged edge glinting. Evade. Hale barked and the helmsman yanked the controls. The Vanguard rolled, shields flaring blue as they grazed the obstacle. Sparks danced across the viewscreen but they held. From the comms, Xer'Thal's voice crackled again, laced with amusement. Your ingenuity is but fumbling in the dark. My fleet adapts without effort. Watch as we envelop you. Asterisk Elara's lips curled into a grim smile. Let him talk. Comms jam that frequency. Focus on the board. The Krellians were adapting, all right. Their formation shifting, smaller scouts darting ahead to probe the field. One zipped too close, its sensors blooming like a flower before a human mine, salvaged from the debris, detonated in a silent bloom of fire. The scout crumpled, spinning away in pieces. Got one, Novak said, pumping a fist. But her triumph faded as red alerts blared. Captain, incoming salvo. They're firing blind through the field. Torpedoes streaked in erratic paths weaving through the junk. The Vanguard shuddered under impacts, hull integrity dropping to 80%. Elara's mind raced. Direct counterfire would waste ammo on ghosts in the debris. No, they needed something smarter. Novak, vent plasma from the auxiliary ports. Make it look like we're venting Atmo. Draw them in. The engineer hesitated, then grinned. Risky, but yeah. It'll mask our signature. Hatches hissed open on the ship's underbelly, spewing ionized gas that mimicked a dying vessel. The Krellian scouts veered toward it, greedy for the kill. Elara watched, breath held as Hale lined up the shot. Fire all tubes, she ordered. Missiles lanced out, guided by the Vanguard's adaptive targeting, human software that learned from each evasion, predicting the scouts' paths. Two exploded in rapid succession, their debris adding to the chaos. But the third twisted away, locking onto the Vanguard's bait. It hit the plasma cloud, and ignited. The explosion rippled outward, a miniature sun swallowing 3 Krellian vessels in its grasp. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Elara silenced them with a raised hand. The cost was there. Their own shields flickered and a power conduit sparked in engineering. Xer'Thal's fleet reformed, tighter now, anger bleeding into their transmissions. You delay the inevitable, asterisk, he snarled. But your tricks end here. Asterisk Elara leaned forward, eyes on the Admiral's flagship, its massive form cutting through the field's edge like a blade. Adaptation, he called it predictable. But humans, they turned desperation into defiance, one calculated risk at a time. The Vanguard pressed on, deeper into the maze, stakes rising with every twist. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Reliance engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field loomed, a jagged graveyard of rock and ice tumbling in lazy orbits around the gas giant's pole. It was the perfect ambush spot, or so the plan went. But plans had a way of fraying at the edges when Xer'Thal's Vanguard cruisers started probing the edges. Status on the decoys? Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the cautious one, always double-checking vectors and shield harmonics, while her XO Lieutenant Reyes pushed for the bold strokes. Reyes leaned over the sensor station, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. 3 drones mimicking our signature, ma'am. They're drawing fire from that lead Xari frigate. But Xer'Thal's flagship is holding back, scanning deeper. He sniffs out the trap. Reyes trailed off, his dark eyes narrowing. The Xari admiral had earned his reputation for arrogance, broadcasting taunts across open channels earlier that cycle. Asterisk primitive mammals, your scattershot fleets amuse me. Adaptation? You cling to it like driftwood in a storm. Asterisk Alara didn't rise to it. Words were cheap, actions carved the stars. Helm, ease us behind that cluster at bearing 247. Keep emissions low, no heroics. Ensign Tarek nodded, his youthful face set in determination, guiding the Reliant through a narrow gap where boulders the size of destroyers spun perilously close. A sharp jolt rocked the ship as a micrometeor pinged off the hull, but they pressed on. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing across the bridge. Incoming missiles from the frigate, the weapons officer shouted. Alara's mind raced, too soon, too coordinated. The decoys were pulling their weight, but Xer'Thal's sensors must have pierced the veil. Evasive pattern Delta 7. Countermeasures full spread. The Reliant shuddered as point defense lasers lanced out, swatting warheads from the void in bursts of plasma. One slipped through, detonating close enough to send sparks flying from a console. A junior tech yelped, clutching a singed arm, but Alara waved off the medics. Focus. Reyes, reroute power to forward shields. Tarek, thread us through the field, use the rocks for cover. Reyes hesitated a fraction, his witty retort dying on his lips as he saw the readouts. That's cutting it razor thin, Captain. One wrong drift. Do it. Her tone brooked no argument. The Reliant dove, engines flaring blue against the black, weaving between tumbling stones that could pulverize them in an instant. Behind, the Xari frigate pursued, its sleek, iridescent hull gleaming like a predator's scale. But the asteroid field's chaos was humanity's ally, unpredictable, unforgiving to rigid formations. As they burst from the cluster's edge, Alara's gamble paid off. The pursuing ship clipped a stray boulder, its shields flaring in protest, buying them precious seconds. Now weapons, target their engines. Make it hurt. Torpedoes streaked away, guided by Tarek's precise adjustments, slamming into the frigate's aft section. Explosions bloomed, venting atmosphere in silent screams. But victory tasted like ash. Sensors lit up with fresh contacts. Xer'Thal's main force emerging from hyperspace jump, a wedge of cruisers and destroyers blotting out the stars. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comms, laced with mocking glee. See how your ingenuity falters. We adapt by conquest, you by desperation. Asterisk Alara's jaw tightened. Desperation had forged humanity's edge time and again. All hands battle stations. Reyes, prep the adaptation protocol. It's time they learned what that word really means. The bridge crew moved as one, a symphony of grit and resolve, while the void filled with the first salvos of war. The Reliant's hull groaned under the strain, but it held, a testament to human stubbornness amid the gathering storm. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared a staccato rhythm through the bridge. The Xer'Thal fleet had closed the gap faster than anticipated, their crystalline hulls shimmering like jagged icebergs against the nebula's swirling purples. She'd led her ragtag squadron of human frigates into this ambush deliberately, bait to draw out the Admiral's prized destroyer. But now, with plasma bolts scorching the void mere kilometers away, doubt flickered in her chest. Shields at 60%, Lieutenant Reyes called from tactics, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. Reyes was the cautious one, always double-checking scans, but today his precision might be their lifeline. Enemy formations adapting, they're flanking our port side. Alara nodded, eyes locked on the holographic display. The nebula's interference had been their edge, scrambling Xer'Thal sensors just enough to let her team slip through. But Admiral Xer'Thal's arrogance had blinded him to human unpredictability. He'd broadcasted his mockery across open channels earlier, calling their maneuvers primitive flailing. Now his lead ship loomed, its weapons arrays charging with the ominous hum that vibrated through the comms. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7, Alara ordered. The ship lurched as thrusters fired, weaving through a debris field of shattered asteroids. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, a glancing hit from an enemy drone. She tasted blood from biting her lip, the metallic tang grounding her. No room for error. One wrong move and her crew, 50 souls including the engineer who'd jury-rigged their shields from scrap, would be vapor. In the engineering bay 2 decks below, Specialist Kai Trent wiped grease from his hands and patched another conduit. Kai was the witty heart of the team, cracking jokes even as bulkheads groaned. "If that admiral thinks we're done, tell him we're just getting warmed up," he'd quipped during the last drill. Now, with power fluctuations threatening to drop their defenses, he barked orders to his 2 assistants. "Reroute auxiliary from life support, non-essentials only. We need every joule for the countermeasures." Back on the bridge, Reyes swiveled in his chair. "Captain, their destroyers launching boarding pods. If they breach, they won't." Alara's voice cut sharp, masking the knot in her gut. The Xer'Thal prided themselves on rigid hierarchies, their warriors enhanced with neural implants for perfect coordination. Humans. They thrived on chaos, on the grit of improvisation. She'd seen it in the war's early days. Outnumbered colonies turning scrap into weapons, pilots flying blind through storms. The first pod slammed into their hull amidships, the impact shuddering through the deck like a hammer blow. Alarms escalated, red lights pulsing. "Breach in Sector 4. Someone shouted. Alara hit the intercom. "Trent, seal it off, but keep the vents open on my mark." "Aye, Cap. Give me the word and I'll flood him with the good stuff." He turned to Reyes. "Prep the decoy drone swarm. Launch on my go." The plan was risky. Release a flock of holographic projectors mimicking their fleet signatures, drawing fire while they looped back for a torpedo run. But Xer'Thal scanners pierced illusions better than most. If the Admiral adapted first. Another volley rocked them, shields flickering to 30%. Alara's mind raced. Adapt or die, that's what humans did. The nebula's gas clouds could amplify their EMP burst, but it'd fry their own systems too if timed wrong. "Pods docking, Marines inbound," Reyes reported, his fingers flying over controls. "Marines, hold the line," Alara commanded over the net. Sergeant Lila Kane's voice crackled back, fierce and unyielding. Lila, brave to a fault, led the boarding defense with a mix of pulse rifles and homemade grenades. "We've got this, Foss. Just keep the ship flying." The hologram showed Xer'Thal troops pouring from the pods, their exocets gleaming under emergency lights in the breached corridor. Gunfire echoed through the ship, muffled bursts that made Alara's pulse thunder. "Trent, now," she snapped. From engineering, Kai triggered the vents. Not poison gas as the invaders might expect, but aerosolized conductive foam, his invention cobbled from hull sealant and capacitor fluid. It coated the Xer'Thal warriors, shorting their implants in a cascade of sparks. Screams filtered through the comms, alien and raw. On the bridge, Reyes hooped despite himself. It worked, pods are offline. But triumph soured fast. The destroyer adjusted course, its main battery locking on. "Incoming broadside," the computer intoned. Alara slammed the launch command. Drones erupted from their bays, blooming into false signatures that danced across the nebula. The destroyer's fire split, bolts lancing into phantoms. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, then chaos as real torpedoes streaked from her frigates. The Admiral's ship twisted, evading most, but one struck true, crumpling its flank in a bloom of fire. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Alara's gaze stayed on the display. Xer'Thal's vessel limped, but reinforcements warped in, 3 cruisers, closing like predators. "We bought time," she said, voice low. "But the cost, Sector 4's a mess. And our shields are toast." Reyes met her eyes, the weight settling. "What's the play now, Captain?" She straightened, the nebula's glow casting shadows across her face. Adaptation wasn't just survival. It was rewriting the rules mid-fight. "We dive deeper into the nebula. Let them chase ghosts while we hit their supply line." As the ship accelerated into the swirling clouds, Alara felt the familiar burn of resolve. Xer'Thal had mocked them once. He'd learn soon enough. Humans didn't break. They bent. The Captain. Elena Reyes gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the bridge alarms blared in staccato bursts. The Xer'Thal fleet had adapted faster than expected, their plasma shields flickering back online just as the human armada's initial barrage petered out. Xer'Thal's voice crackled over the open channel, laced with that smug, guttural satisfaction. See primitives? Your crude volleys falter against true discipline. Surrender now and perhaps we'll dissect fewer of you. She ignored him, eyes locked on the tactical display. The asteroid field they'd chosen for the ambush was a graveyard of jagged rocks, perfect for hiding the remnants of her squadron. But now 3 enemy cruisers were vectoring in, their sensors piercing the debris like knives through fog. Lieutenant Marco Hale, her ever-cautious XO, leaned in close, his voice a low rumble. Captain, if we don't pull back they'll flank us. We've lost the element of surprise. Elena shook her head, her mind racing through the debris patterns. Surprise was gone, but the field itself was a weapon waiting to be wielded. No, Marco. We're not running. Remember the drills. Adapt or die. She tapped the comms, addressing the crew with the steady calm that had kept them alive through a dozen skirmishes. All hands prep for kinetic redirection. Engineering, route auxiliary power to the grav emitters. We turn their momentum against them. The plan was a Hail Mary, born from late-night sims back on the Endurance. Human ships weren't built for the elegant energy weapons of the Xer'Thal. Theirs were stubborn, modular hulks designed for salvage and survival. As the first cruiser loomed closer, its turrets swiveling to lock on, Elena initiated the sequence. Bursts of artificial gravity pulsed from the emitters, invisible tethers snagging the largest asteroid in their path, a house-sized boulder tumbling lazily through the void. It accelerated, hurtling toward the enemy like a bullet from a slingshot. The Xer'Thal captain's laughter cut short on the channel. What sorcery is this? Evasive, too late. The rock slammed into the cruiser's forward shields, crumpling them in a shower of ionized particles. Alarms wailed on the enemy bridge, audible even through the feed. Elena allowed herself a grim smile. That's not sorcery, Admiral. That's physics with a human twist. But triumph was fleeting. The other 2 cruisers adjusted, firing lancing beams that vaporized smaller debris around her ship. A hit grazed the hull, shaking the bridge like a thunderclap. Sparks flew from a panel, and Ensign Lila Torres, the witty young navigator with a penchant for dark humor, cursed under her breath as she rerouted systems. Shields at 40% cap. If they get a clean shot, we're space confetti. Keep us dancing, Lila, Elena ordered, her fingers flying over the controls to sync the emitters with the NAV array. The ship bucked as another grav pulse rippled out, this time yanking a cluster of metallic shards, wreckage from a prior battle, into a makeshift swarm. They peppered the second cruiser, scoring its armor and forcing it to veer off course. Xer'Thal's fury boiled over the comms. Insolent vermin. You throw stones like cave dwellers while we command the stars. My fleet will grind your ingenuity to dust. Marco glanced at her, doubt flickering in his eyes. He's right about one thing, they outnumber us 3-1 now. We can't keep this up. Elena's jaw set. She'd seen too many good crews lost to arrogance like his. Humans didn't win with overwhelming force. They won by bending the rules, by turning the battlefield into their workshop. Watch me, she muttered, then broadcast to the squadron. All ships mirror my pattern. Grav sling the debris belts. Aim for their engine vents. We make this field a meat grinder. As the emitters hummed to life across the fleet, the asteroids began to dance. One enemy cruiser tried to punch through, only to collide with a redirected boulder that sheared off its wing. Explosions bloomed silently in the black, debris adding to the chaos. Xer'Thal's lead ship twisted away, but not before a lucky shard pierced its hull, venting atmosphere in a ghostly plume. Elena watched the display, tension coiling in her gut. They'd bought time, bloodied their noses, but the Admiral's reinforcements were inbound. The cost was already mounting. 2 Allied fighters gone, their pilot signals flatlining. Adaptation wasn't free. It demanded everything. And as the field churned into a lethal ballet, she wondered if even human grit could outlast the Admiral's unyielding pride. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming data. The bridge of the UNS Endurance hummed with the low thrum of overtaxed engines, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and sweat. Her team, Lieutenant Raj Patel at navigation, sharp-eyed and quick with calculations, Dr. Lena Kowalski, the engineer whose hands never stopped tinkering, and Sergeant Marco Ruiz, the Marine whose quiet intensity spoke of battles fought in silence, huddled close, their faces illuminated by the red emergency lights. "Status on the breach?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The alien fleet had cornered them in the asteroid belt of Epsilon Eridani, Xer'Thal's dreadnought looming like a shadowed behemoth just beyond sensor range. The Admiral's taunts had come over open channels earlier, his voice a guttural rasp dismissing human primitive improvisation as futile against Kragthar precision. Raj tapped his screen, pulling up the schematics. "Hull integrity at 62%, Captain. That plasma volley cracked the outer plating on Deck 4. We're venting atmosphere, but I've rerouted power to seal it." His fingers danced across the controls, rerouting auxiliary lines with the finesse of a surgeon. But even he couldn't hide the strain. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. Lena leaned in, her toolkit clanking against the console. "It's worse than that. The adaptive shielding on their lead ship is modulating frequencies faster than we can jam. Our last EMP burst bought us 10 minutes, but they're recalibrating already." She wiped grease from her cheek, leaving a streak like war paint. In her eyes burned that unyielding spark, the kind that turned scrap into salvation. Marco stood apart, checking his rifle's charge with methodical clicks. "Scans show boarding pods prepping. If they punch through, it'll be close quarters. My team's ready, but we're outnumbered 3-1. His words carried no bravado, just fact, honed from years scraping by on colony frontiers. Elara nodded, forcing her mind to the plan. They'd lured the Kragthar into the belt's dense debris field, betting on human agility against alien might. The initial feint, deploying decoy drones to mimic a retreat, had worked, drawing Xer'Thal's vanguard into a gravitational snag. But now, with the dreadnought closing, their escape vector was choked by tumbling rocks the size of frigates. "Adjust course to 247 Mark 12, she ordered. "Raj, plot us through the narrow pass. Lena, can you boost the thrusters with that jury-rigged fusion tap?" "Aye, but it'll cook the injectors in 20 minutes flat." Lena was already under the panel, sparks flying as she fused conduits. "We adapt or we die, right? Just like those old Earth stories." The ship groaned as Raj executed the maneuver, the Endurance twisting through a gap barely wider than its hull. Alarms blared, proximity warning. A Kragthar corvette grazed their flank, shearing off a sensor array in a burst of fire. Elara braced as the deck shuddered, the impact sending tools skittering. "Direct hit on their bridge?" Marco asked, peering at the tactical overlay. Raj shook his head. "Negative." They shrugged it off. "Xer'Thal's laughing at us, I can almost hear it." Elara's jaw tightened. The Admiral had broadcast his contempt hours ago. "Your species clings to chaos like insects in the storm. We Kragthar bend the stars to our will." But she knew better. Humans didn't bend stars. They survived them, piecing together victories from the wreckage. Another volley lit the void, lancing through the asteroids. One bolt clipped a boulder ahead, fragmenting it into a deadly swarm. "Evasive!" Elara shouted. Raj yanked the yoke, the ship corkscrewing wildly. Chunks of rock pinged off the shields, each impact a hammer blow. Lena emerged, face smudged. "Thrusters at 130%. We've got a window. Punch it now." Raj complied, and the Endurance surged forward, weaving through the shrapnel like a needle in a haystack. For a heartbeat it seemed they'd slip free. The dreadnought's guns tracked but couldn't lock, the belt's chaos their ally. Then the comms crackled. Xer'Thal's voice again, laced with amusement. "Predictable. Your flight mimics the prey animal, erratic but ultimately ensnared." Sensors screamed. Boarding pods, dozens, launched from the corvettes, propelled by pinpoint thrusters. They'd anticipated the pass, seeding it with ambushers. Pods inbound, multiple vectors. Raj yelled. Marco was already moving, barking orders to his squad over the intercom. "Lock and load. They're coming through the vents." Elara slammed the alert klaxon. The plan had backfired. The belt's cover was now a trap, funneling them into the aliens' grasp. A pod breached the hull with a deafening screech, alien warriors spilling into the corridors, towering, chitin-armored, their energy blades humming. Lena grabbed a plasma cutter from her kit, eyes fierce. "We hold the bridge. Adapt, people, make them regret underestimating us." The first shots echoed from below, Marco's team meeting the boarders head-on. Elara drew her sidearm, the weight familiar in her palm. The cost was mounting. Lives, ship, the fragile hope of turning the tide against Xer'Thal's empire. But as the fight raged, she felt the grit rise, human grit, unbreakable. In the fray, Raj spotted a glitch in the pod signatures. Captain, their propulsion's slaved to the dreadnought. If we can overload their command link. Alara's mind raced, piecing it together. A desperate hack risky as hell. Lena, you with me. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Usus relentless vibrating through her bones like a distant storm. The bridge was a hive of controlled chaos, consoles flickering with red alerts, officers murmuring coordinates into headsets, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and sweat. Her team had been pushing this offensive for hours, weaving through the debris field of shattered alien cruisers, but now the Admiral's flagship loomed on the view screen, a behemoth of iridescent hull plating that dwarfed their destroyer. Status on the breach torpedoes? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Lieutenant Ramirez, her wiry tactical officer with a perpetual squint from too many late-night sims, didn't look up from his panel. Locked and loaded, Cap. But their point defenses are adapting. Those energy webs are slicing our decoys like butter. He tapped a sequence, sending another drone swarm hurtling forward. On the screen, the drones bloomed into false signatures, mimicking inbound missiles, but the alien shields pulsed and unraveled them mid-flight. Elena nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. They'd planned for this. The Xari Admiral Xer'Thal was infamous for his rigid doctrines, scorning human improvisation as chaotic folly. But chaos was their edge. Reroute power to the forward arrays. Fire the EMP lancers on my mark. Let's blind the bastard before he learns our pattern. Across the fleet channel, voices crackled in agreement. Ensign Patel from engineering chimed in, his accent clipped with urgency. Reactors at 110%, ma'am. But if we push harder, we risk cascade failure on the port nacelle. Do it, Elena said. We've got no choice. That flagship's coordinating the whole blockade. If it falls, their line crumbles. She watched as the Relentless surged ahead, engines flaring blue against the void. The debris field glittered like shattered glass around them, remnants of the last skirmish where human grit had turned the tide, but at the cost of 3 corvettes and a dozen good souls. The plan was simple on paper. Slip through the gaps in the Xari formation using salvaged wreckage as cover, then hit the Admiral's ship with a coordinated strike. But nothing stayed simple in space combat. As the EMP lancers charged with a rising whine, a new alert blared. Xari interceptors peeling off from the flagship, their sleek forms darting like predatory fish. They're on to us. Ramirez shouted, fingers flying across controls. The first interceptor volley struck home, rocking the ship with a shudder that sent coffee mugs skittering across the deck. Alarms wailed as hull integrity dipped to 82%. Elena braced against the jolt, tasting blood from a bitten lip. Evasive pattern delta, roll us starboard and launch countermeasures. The Relentless twisted, gravity compensators straining, while chaff burst from her flanks in a glittering cloud. One interceptor vaporized against the debris, but another grazed their shields, sparks erupting from a console nearby. In the midst of it, Sergeant Hale, her grizzled Marine liaison, leaned over from the auxiliary station, his face scarred from a boarding action years back. Cap, those bastards are learning too fast. Xer'Thal's feeding them real-time data. Our feints aren't buying time anymore. She met his eyes, seeing the same fire that had kept him fighting through worse odds. Then we adapt faster. Patch me through to the away team on the derelict. The channel opened with a hiss, connecting to the makeshift boarding party who'd infiltrated a drifting Xari frigate hours earlier. Now their wild card. Relentless to Alpha Squad, Elena said, dodging another tremor as the ship bucked. Torpedoes away in 30. You got eyes on their command net. Corporal Singh's voice came back, strained over the static of suit comms. Affirmative, but it's a mess down here. Their encryption's shifting. Looks like the Admiral's overriding protocols manually. We're rigging the core for overload, but we need that EMP to fry their backups first. Elena glanced at the timer. 20 seconds. The flagship filled the view screen now, its weapons bays glowing with lethal promise. A direct hit from those could end them all. Hold tight. We're making this happen. Ramirez's voice cut in urgent. Incoming broadside. Evade. The Relentless lurched into a barrel roll, phaser fire lancing past like lightning. Elena's stomach flipped, but she held focus, counting down. Mark. The EMP lancers fired, invisible waves rippling out to engulf the interceptors and claw at the flagship's shields. For a heartbeat, silence fell. No alarms, just the soft beep of systems rebooting. Then chaos renewed. The Xari defenses stuttered, buying them a window. Torpedoes away! Ramirez yelled. The breach munitions streaked forward, burrowing into the weakened hull. Explosions bloomed across the Admiral's ship, secondary detonations chaining like fireworks. But victory soured fast. Singh's comm crackled back. Course primed, but we're pinned. Xari security teams breached our position. Request immediate evac. Elena's jaw tightened. The plan had worked partially, but now her people were trapped in the crossfire. Hale, prep the shuttles. We're going in. As the relentless closed distance, firing suppression volleys, she felt the weight of it all. The lives hanging on her next call, the Admiral's mocking broadcasts from earlier battles echoing in her mind. Adaptation wasn't just tactics. It was this, the raw push when everything teetered. The bridge crew moved as one, a testament to months of drills and shared scars. Yet as they dove toward the fray, Elena couldn't shake the scan data flickering on her personal display. Xer'Thal's vessel was venting atmosphere, but Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Reliance engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from the recycled air but from the weight of the decision she'd just made. The alien fleet, led by Admiral Xer'Thal's flagship, the Varathian behemoth called Stormreaver, had cornered them in the asteroid belt of Epsilon Eridani. Xer'Thal's transmissions had been laced with that smug certainty. Humans were predictable, their tactics as rigid as their fragile bones. But Alara knew better. Adaptation wasn't a strategy. It was survival etched into every human soul. Engineering, reroute auxiliary power to the forward shields. She barked into the comm, her voice cut through the red-lit bridge, steady despite the chaos. Beside her, Lieutenant Marco Reyes, the ship's wiry tactics officer, hunched over his console, fingers flying across holographic displays. Marco was the cautious one, always double-checking angles, but today his eyes burned with that quiet fire Alara relied on. Across from him, Ensign Lila Chen monitored sensors, her quick wit silenced by the tension coiling in the air. The Stormreaver loomed on the main view screen, its jagged hull scarred from earlier skirmishes, energy lances charging with a predatory glow. Xer'Thal's voice crackled over the open channel, translated into clipped English. Surrender, Captain Voss. Your improvised maneuvers amuse me, but they delay the inevitable. Humanity's vaunted flexibility breaks under true pressure. Alara's lips curled into a grim smile. She'd heard the Admiral's boasts before, how Varathian doctrine prized unyielding precision, ships moving in flawless symmetry. But humans, they thrived in the cracks. Admiral, if pressure's what you want, we've got plenty to share. She cut the line, turning to Marco. Status on the decoys? Deployed, Mum. The drones are mimicking our signature. Should buy us 30 seconds. Marco's voice was tight, his dark eyes flicking to the incoming fire. The asteroids around them tumbled lazily, silent witnesses to the dance of death. Lila leaned forward, her fingers tracing sensor ghosts. Enemies locking on. But wait, there's a microfracture in their port nacelle from our last hit. We can exploit it. Alara nodded, the plan crystallizing in her mind. The early feint with the mining probes had failed spectacularly. Xer'Thal's interceptors had shredded half of them, but it had forced the Stormreaver to expose its flank. Now with the belt's debris as cover, they had one shot. Helm, plot an evasive through the K7 cluster. Full burn on my mark. Marco, prep the torpedo spread, cluster pattern not linear. The bridge shuddered as the Reliant dove into the asteroid field, gravitational tugs pulling at the hull like invisible hands. Chunks of rock the size of shuttles whipped past, one grazing the shields with a screech of protesting metal. Alara felt the ship groan under her, every rivet a testament to human stubbornness. Xer'Thal thought them reckless, she called it necessary. Mark. The engines roared, propelling them into the heart of the cluster. Alarms blared, shields at 60%, incoming plasma bolts searing the void. On the view screen, the decoys bloomed like false stars, drawing the Stormreaver's fire. For a heartbeat it worked. The alien ship hesitated, its precise formation fracturing as interceptors peeled off to pursue phantoms. But Xer'Thal adapted too. His voice returned, laced with fury. Clever human. But illusions shatter. The Storm Reaver surged forward, its lances carving through the decoys, closing the gap with brutal efficiency. Alara's heart pounded. The fracture in the nacelle. Lila's sharp eye had spotted it amid the debris storm. Weapons target that weak point. Fire on my command. Marco's hands trembled slightly as he aligned the shots, his caution warring with the need to strike true. The Reliant twisted, a torpedo salvo launching in a wild arc, curving around asteroids like arrows seeking flesh. One struck home, the explosion blooming against the Storm Reaver's hull, a brilliant flare of superheated gas. The alien ship listed, secondary explosions rippling along its side. Cheers erupted on the bridge, short and fierce, but Alara silenced them with a raised hand. It's not over. Sensors showed the Storm Reaver stabilizing, its remaining lances swiveling toward them. Xer'Thal's fleet was regrouping, the Admiral's pride demanding retaliation. But in that moment of vulnerability, Alara saw the cost. Damaged systems, crew compartments venting atmosphere. Humans didn't fight for glory, they fought to endure. Evade and regroup, she ordered, the Reliant slipping back into the shadows of the belt. Marco glanced at her, a nod of shared resolve passing between them. Lila's voice cut in, urgent but steady. Ma'am, their engines are fluctuating. We've hurt them. Alara allowed herself a breath. Adaptation meant turning pain into purpose. Xer'Thal had mocked their tactics, but as the Storm Reaver limped, trailing plasma, she wondered if the Admiral finally glimpsed the truth. Humans didn't break. They bent, and in bending they struck back harder. The chase continued, the asteroid field a labyrinth of peril and promise. Alara's mind raced ahead, plotting the next twist. The war wasn't won in one blow, but each adaptation chipped away at the enemy's certainty. And in the cold silence of space, that was enough for now. Captain Ellis gripped the makeshift barricade, her knuckles white against the rusted metal. The corridor hummed with the low thrum of failing life support, and the air tasted of ozone and desperation. Behind her, Sergeant Ramirez reloaded his pulse rifle with steady hands, his face a mask of grim focus. They're closing in, Cap. That last breach took out half the med bay. His voice was low, edged with the weariness of days without rest. She nodded, peering through the flickering emergency lights at the shadows beyond. The Xer'Thal fleet had glassed 3 colonies already, their admiral broadcasting taunts across open channels, mocking human primitive ingenuity as if it were a joke. But here in the guts of the derelict station they'd turned into a fortress, Ellis's team had held for 48 hours. Not through superior tech, but by turning every scrap into a weapon. Jury-rigged mines from coolant canisters, EMP bursts from salvaged consoles. Lieutenant Chin crouched beside them, her fingers flying over a cracked data pad. I've got a partial seal on the ventral hatch, but it'll buy us 10 minutes at best. Admiral's Vanguard is adaptive. Those drones are learning our patterns. Chen's caution had saved them twice already, spotting traps before they sprang. Now her eyes narrowed at the screen, calculating odds that grew worse by the second. A distant explosion rocked the deck, sending sparks cascading like metallic rain. Ellis's mind raced. Their initial plan, lure the boarders into a kill zone with false distress signals, had backfired when Xer'Thal's forces adapted, deploying hunter-killers that bypassed the vents. 2 Marines gone, their screams echoing in the logs. Stakes were personal now. Ramirez's squad from Epsilon 4, Chen's family on the line. Failure meant the Admiral's armada pushing unchecked to Seoul. New play, Ellis said, her voice cutting through the din. We don't hold. We hit them where it hurts. She pulled a schematic from her belt pouch, the paper crinkling under grimy fingers. The station's core reactor, unstable since the first assault, could be overloaded, but it required crossing open ground exposed to the alien phalanx. Ramirez snorted, wiping sweat from his brow. Suicide run? Thought you humans were the adaptive ones. But there was no bite in it. Camaraderie forged in fire made arguments fuel for resolve. Chin looked up, her wit flashing despite the strain. Only if we do it their way. Give me 5. I'll spoof the auxiliary controls, make it look like the reactor's priming for evac. Draw their heavies off us. Ellis met their gazes, the weight of command settling like the debris around them. One image burned in her mind. The Admiral's holographic sneer from the intercepted feed, his mandibles clicking in disdain. Adaptation wasn't just tech, it was this, humans bending not breaking. They moved as one. Ramirez laid suppressing fire, bolts sizzling against the advancing drones. Chen's hack lit the corridor in false alarms, pulling the enemy like moths. Alice led the charge, her boots pounding the grated floor, heart sinking with the station's dying pulse. A drone whirred close, its sensors whirring, she smashed it with a hydraulic strut, sparks flying as it crumpled. Deeper in, the reactor chamber loomed, a cavern of throbbing conduits and warning klaxons. Xer'Thal's troops were already there, their chitinous forms silhouetted against the glow. But the humans had the edge of surprise, of grit that turned traps into triumphs. As they breached the chamber, Alice whispered into her calm, "For Epsilon. For all of us." The fight was far from over, but in that moment adaptation meant survival, and the Admiral would learn it the hard way. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Vanguard's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from fear but from the recycled air turning stale in the heat of battle. Around her, the bridge crew moved with practiced fury, Lieutenant Rao at tactical barking coordinates, Ensign Patel rerouting power from non-essentials to shields. The view screen flickered with the chaos of the asteroid field, jagged rocks tumbling like forgotten dice in the void. "They're adapting again," Rao said, his voice tight, fingers dancing over holographic displays. The alien ships, sleek and predatory under Xer'Thal's command, had shifted formation for the third time in as many minutes. What started as a rigid phalanx now wove through the debris with eerie precision, their energy lances carving glowing paths that forced the human flotilla to scatter. Elena nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The Admiral's arrogance had been their initial edge, his broadcasts mocking human primitive improvisation, as the fleet had ambushed his vanguard at Epsilon Eridani. But now, with half their destroyers venting atmosphere and the carrier Indomitable listing from a core breach, adaptation cut both ways. "Rao, signal the wolves. Tell them to feint port. Draw the cruisers into the cluster at Mark 7. The wolves, Captain Hale's squadron of fighters, acknowledged with a burst of encrypted chatter. On the screen, the tiny sparks of human craft darted left, baiting the larger alien vessels. Xer'Thal's flagship, the Thaler Prime, loomed at the rear, its hull a fortress of iridescent alloy, broadcasting taunts in broken English. "Your tricks falter, mammals. Yield to superior design." Elena ignored it, focusing on the debris field. The asteroids weren't just cover. They were weapons waiting to be wielded. Patel prepped the grapples. "We're going to borrow some momentum." The ensign's eyes widened, but he complied, his hands steady despite the doubt. Grapples were mining tools, not battle gear, meant for hauling or from dead rocks, not slinging them at warships. But humans made do. As the wolves pulled back, the alien cruisers surged, lances firing in synchronized bursts that lit the field in staccato blue. One rock exploded under the onslaught, shards peppering the Vanguard's hull with dull thuds. Elena felt the ship shudder, alarms blaring briefly before auxiliary systems kicked in. "Now," she ordered. From the Vanguard's underbelly, magnetic grapples shot out, latching onto a house-sized boulder tumbling lazily toward the enemy line. Thrusters fired in reverse, the ship's engines straining as they imparted spin to the asteroid. It hurtled forward like a cosmic hammer, smashing into the lead cruiser amidships. The alien vessel buckled, its formation fracturing as secondary explosions bloomed. Cheers erupted on the bridge, short and fierce, cut off by Rao's warning. Thaler Prime's turning, full broadside incoming. The Admiral's ship pivoted, its main batteries charging with a malevolent glow. Elena's plan had bought time, but Xer'Thal was closing the net. Scans showed his reinforcements, drones swarming from hidden bays, flanking the human positions. The cost was mounting. The destroyer Lexington had just gone dark, its crew's fate a silent void on the TAC map. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta," Elena said, her voice calm steel. "Rao, target their drone control node. Hit it hard." The Vanguard danced through the field, rocks grazing shields and sparks of ionized gas. Rao's torpedoes streaked out, weaving past countermeasures to strike the flagship's underbelly. A plume of debris erupted, but the Thaler Prime pressed on undeterred. In the midst of the fray, a calm pinged, Captain Hale's voice ragged over static. "Vanguard, we've got a window." Pushing through to the Admiral's bridge cluster. "Cover us." Elena's jaw set. The wolves were down to half strength, pilots burning out in their cockpits. But denial meant defeat. "Affirmative. All batteries on those drones, give them hell." As fighters screamed toward the Thaler Prime, Elena watched the screen, the weight of command pressing like the asteroid's gravity. One wrong move and the field would claim them all. Yet in the grit of it she saw the spark. Humans didn't break, they bent, reforged stronger. Xer'Thal would learn that soon enough. The battle raged on, the void alive with fire and stone. The bridge of the Xer'Thal flagship shuddered under another barrage, the hull groaning like a beast in its death throes. Admiral Xer'Thal gripped the armrests of his command throne, his iridescent scales paling to a sickly gray. The view screen flickered, showing the human corvette, that insignificant speck of a ship, weaving through the debris field with impossible precision. He'd laughed at their tactics hours ago, called them primitives flailing in the void. Now his fleet lay in ruins, picked apart by ingenuity he couldn't comprehend. "Status, Captain." Xer'Thal barked, his voice a rasp over the blaring alarms. The captain, her tentacles twitching with fatigue, glanced at her console. "Shields at 12%, Admiral. The human vessel has adapted their weapon again. It's bypassing our frequency modulators. We've lost the rear batteries." Xer'Thal's mandibles clicked in fury. Adaptation. The word burned in his mind. His people had conquered stars with rigid strategies, unyielding formations passed down through cycles. Humans. They twisted, they improvised like water-eroding stone. He'd seen it from the start. When their initial assault failed against his blockade, they'd turned the asteroids into weapons, slinging fragments with jury-rigged railguns. When his interceptors closed in, the corvette vented plasma to create a false engine signature, luring half his squadron into a minefield of their own making. And now this. The final ploy. "Redirect power to forward arrays," he ordered. "Target their engines. End this farce." But the human ship anticipated it. As his gunners fired, the corvette rolled, exposing not its vulnerable belly but a patchwork array of salvaged armor, plates ripped from Xer'Thal's own destroyed frigates, welded on in the heat of battle. The shots glanced off, sparking harmlessly into the void. On the human bridge, Captain Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her brow, her hands steady on the makeshift controls. Beside her, Engineer Patel grunted as he rerouted power from life support, the air growing thin and stale. "They're committing everything," he said, voice calm despite the red lights flashing across his panel. "One good hit and we're vapor." Elena nodded, eyes locked on the tactical display. Her crew, just 12 souls down from 20 after the ambush, had held together through every failure. The initial plan to slip past the blockade had backfired spectacularly, trapping them in this graveyard of twisted metal. But they'd adapted, scavenging parts mid-firefight, turning enemy debris into shields, hacking into Xer'Thal's comms to sow false orders among his ranks. "Fire the disruptor," she said. Patel hit the switch. The corvette's forward cannons, overclocked with alien tech they'd reverse-engineered on the fly, unleashed a pulsing wave. It wasn't a clean beam, it was a chaotic storm of modulated energy, frequencies shifting like a living thing to match the Admiral's shields and then invert them. Aboard the flagship the wave hit. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Xer'Thal felt the deck buck beneath him as shields collapsed inward, crumpling sections of the hull. His captain screamed as a bulkhead gave way, tentacles flailing in the sudden vacuum. "Evacuate!" Xer'Thal roared, but it was too late. The human ship closed in, its point defense guns picking off escape pods with surgical strikes. No mercy, no quarter, just the cold efficiency of survival. Elena watched the flagship fracture, a blooming flower of fire and debris. "Cease fire," she whispered, slumping back.